Season 3. Today we have with us a very special guest, Whitney Bischoff Angel, who most of you may know from Season 19 of The Bachelor. Whitney has been a fertility nurse for over 15 years and is currently working at OVA Egg Freezing Specialty Center in Chicago, Illinois. Not only has fertility been at the forefront of Whitney's professional career, but she was a fertility patient herself in her 30s when she made the decision to have her own eggs frozen. Whitney is an incredible women's health educator and advocate, and we are so thrilled to have her with us today on the show. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here. I
We're
feel like
so
we started chatting, when was it? Like I reached out to you guys loving this podcast and what you guys have put together. So I feel very privileged to be a part of it. And we chatted several weeks ago, but now it's like all coming to fruition. Like here we are.
Right. And when I was even just giving your intro of a women health advocator, I mean, the fact that you reached out to Amanda and I in our small little podcast, it just goes to show like how excited and eager you are to share everything that you know from a fertility perspective in terms of being a nurse, but then also from your own personal experiences. So we definitely could not be more thrilled to have you on the show and hear everything about egg preservation.
Yes.
And OVA, really, it's so interesting when we posted on the socials yesterday and the day before about OVA, I had 4 people say, I just had a consult there last week or 3 weeks ago.
Really? That's
Yes,
amazing.
isn't it? And so they said it was specific for IVF. So I know it's egg freezing, but do you guys do alternative other options?
We do. I mean, I think that our name is somewhat deceiving as like OVA Egg Freezing Specialty Center. But we do, the whole shebang. But what we really focus on is that being proactive and fertility preservation, whether it's with eggs or embryos. And then for patients that are coming back to use those frozen gametes, we're happy to take them through, the end of the journey and kind of be with their partner through that as well.
Okay, that makes like a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Well, if you
When
want
did
to, Whitney, kind of just like back up a little bit and tell us how you even like got started into this. Like, how did you become a fertility nurse? Kind of just start from the beginning of where it all.
Yeah, it's crazy. Feel like when I was listening to you say that intro and being a fertility nurse for over 15 years, I mean, it seems wild how fast the time has gone because when I was in nursing school, fertility wasn't even on my radar. I wanted to be in like the ER, the cardiac ICU, where all the action is. And I quickly realized that that was not going to be my life's path. So I kind of rerouted and really focused and took a look inside in terms of what is something that's meaningful to me. And women's health was really at the forefront of that. And I, from there, started diving in even deeper, looking into fertility. And I was living in Charleston at the time, and I got a job in fertility in Charleston. And that was just the beginning of it all. And I've never turned back. But I learned a lot on the job, right? Because you don't talk about it too much in nursing school. You talk about getting pregnant. And once that, in the 9 months, but nobody ever talked about the struggles when it doesn't work out as planned. And at every step of my career, I feel like it was an eye-opening kind of stepping stone, to realize when I first started working in fertility, like, wow, it is absolutely a miracle that women get pregnant. And the odds are against us every single month. And then, fast forward and starting to learn about how quickly a woman's ovarian reserve starts to diminish. And I'm moving to Chicago and I'm this young woman, I'm single in the city, and egg freezing is just, you're starting to hear a little bit of like rumblings about it. And I'm thinking, should I do it? Should I make that step for myself? And no one was really talking about it at the time. It was 2013, so a long time ago. And I would talk to my friends about it, and it was just such a taboo topic. Everyone thought that I was crazy or desperate to be thinking about egg freezing. Whereas I was like, this is such an amazing advancement in technology. And this is such a form of empowerment. And I didn't understand why women everywhere weren't doing it. But I think the problem is that women didn't know what was going on with their own body. Women weren't talking about this, and for me, I was lucky because I was in the fertility clinic at that time, day in, day out, talking with women struggling to get pregnant. And I was working in third-party reproduction at the time, which is women that are having to utilize a donor egg or a surrogate. And I would hear those women say all the time, I wish I could go back. I wish I would have been able to freeze my eggs. There's no amount of money that I wouldn't have paid. If I could just go back and have that time back, I would, do this differently. But back then, egg freezing really wasn't around for those women. So for me, I just was like, you know what? I'm doing this. Even if it's just a little bit of control that I'll have over my future fertility, I'm taking it. And I don't know a lot about life. None of us really do, but I always knew that I wanted to be a mom. And if there was something that I could do to help secure that, I was going to do it. So that was when I made the step to freeze my eggs. And in that journey, again, it opened up, it was another stepping stone to, it was an opportunity to educate women on their bodies and their options. And I realized how quickly we didn't know about our own bodies. And the embryologist of the lab that we were working with, Colleen Coughlin, had this amazing idea of having this home base for women that were going through egg freezing. She was just so ahead of her time, realizing like this is going to take off, right? We know that this is going to become something that becomes more, just customary. Women go in for their, annuals, and they're going to be talking about egg freezing. And she was so right. And she asked if I would join her and kind of work for her on this. And I couldn't sign up fast enough. And that is really where OVA kind of came from. I know that I went off on a major tangent there. When you guys told me I could just start talking, I'm like, are you sure?
That's so helpful. No, I love it.
We're going to be on here.
I have so many questions. I think my first question is, when you went through the egg preservation process yourself, did that change how you cared for patients, like moving forward? Did you learn more when you literally were doing it yourself than when you were kind of on the nurse side?
Absolutely, because I think that there's only so much that a textbook or, studies can tell you. To experience it firsthand, to really experience the side effects of the medications or the jitters. I mean, of giving yourself an injection. Just because I'm a nurse and I'm around needles and I draw blood doesn't mean that there's not anxiety around giving myself a shot or the unknown. What is that going to feel like? And that was no different. For me. But I do think that in turn, it did allow me to be a better nurse, because when I now talk to women going through this, I say to them, like, I'm not just telling you this is like what I read you may feel, or that people have told me they have felt. Like, I've done this. I get it. There's nothing that you could say to me right now. Like, I've experienced all of the emotions. I've experienced, even the emotions of making the decision to do it. Because when I'm talking with a lot of women, they maybe haven't even made that decision yet. And I was there, I was there with the, man, it sucks that I'm single, or am I going to meet anyone? Almost kind of feeling like it wasn't like an act of desperation. I did start to listen to others around me. And then I quickly pivoted to absolutely not. This was a form of empowerment. It was one of the best decisions that I've ever made. I can strongly state that I've never talked to a woman that has ever regretted freezing her eggs. The journey might not have been easy. It might not have been what she expected, but when it's all said and done, this is, a part of your life that I think you'll always look back on and say, I'm proud of myself. And I'm so glad that I made that decision for myself.
Gosh,
Yeah. So I have a couple friends that are on I feel like for the last 2 years, they've been just saying, I'm going to freeze my eggs next year. I'm going to freeze my eggs when I turn 35. I'm going to freeze my eggs when I turn 36. What would I hear you're saying it. Like, what would you say to those women? Because it's 2024. It's here. OVA's incredible. You go on your Instagram, and it's like an absolute med spa haven for women.
Oh my
What
God.
would you say to those women that are like, oh, fine, I just need to do it?
Okay, I'm so glad that you asked this question, because when I'm chatting with women, I always tell them we put so much pressure on ourselves as women, not just in this, kind of realm, but with everything in life. I feel like we we have to advocate for ourselves. And when it comes to the pressure of your biological clock and knowing that I'm born with all of the eggs that I'm going to have in my lifetime, I have to make that decision. That's really daunting, and it can add stress onto a woman. And so I tell people, if you're not sure if this is the right decision for you, take the time that you need. Pressuring yourself to do this or to make this big life-changing decision, I don't think that that's the way to go about it. But if you know you're going to freeze your eggs and you're just like, I'm going to wait I know I'm going to do it, but let me wait a year or let me wait 2 years. I say, no. If you've made that decision and you know where you're headed, do it now, because you don't know how quickly your fertility is declining. The one thing we know is it's declining. What we don't know is how rapidly. And I think, that would be my biggest set of advice. Don't pressure yourself. Don't add the added stressor. If you just don't know, like, take the time to figure out that decision for yourself. But if you know you're going to do it, girlfriend, do it.
I love it.
I'm like, it's so true. I love that so much.
There's never going to be a perfect time, right? There's never going to be a time in your life where you're like, I cannot wait to give myself injections every night and to feel bloated and not my best self and go in for a surgical procedure. Like that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that.
You just totally answered my next question. I was going to say, okay, now tell everybody what it's like to freeze your eggs, because people hear IVF, IUI, and they get this like whole like experience, but then you hear about egg preservation and it's just this like unknown pit of like, what is it?
Yeah. I love that question too. You're asking such amazing questions. That if we were to think of IVF as a big circle, egg freezing or egg preservation or egg vitrification, those are all interchangeable terms, is the first half of that. So you're really doing the hardest part by doing the first half of that. The tail end of it is much, easier for the woman. It's less time consuming. It's more of a controlled environment. Whereas this first half is all up to your body and your body's response. So you kind of have to be a little bit like go with the flow with what your body's doing, because we can't control how quickly or slowly you're going to respond to the medications, which is just always so funny, because women that are taking the step to be proactive and look into their fertility and freeze their eggs are typically type A, including myself. So to tell them like, we don't know when it's going to be, or you just kind of have to be flexible, it's an oxymoron. It just is like,
do you feel like your patients have more? So like in Amanda and I's shoes, right? We both went through the IVF process. And so we were like so antsy and like, what's the number? What's the follicles? Do you feel like women that are doing egg preservation have less of that? Like,
no, I think they have
all across the concern.
It is. It's all across the board. It's just a different type of emotion. And I think that's why OVA is so important, is because it's a home base for those women. Many women say when they went through the egg freezing process as part of a fertility clinic, which I do want to say there is nothing wrong with that. For women that have done that, that's totally fine. It's not that OVA is replacing a fertility clinic. I think it's just more of an extension of it. Think of it if it was like your own wing for women going through fertility preservation, because it is about meeting the woman where she's at. And while infertility is so difficult, and I've been there too, and struggling to get pregnant and having miscarriages when you want a baby so bad is so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, egg freezing is just a different type of emotion.
Yeah.
And women are still very anxious about their results, and they want to perform well. They want their body to do well. They want, again, these type A goal-getting women want to knock it out in one treatment cycle, which is not always the case. So I think it's also about the management of expectations before women get into this, is that it's not always a straight line. So sometimes,
I was gonna say, ultimately everybody's end goal is this baby. So you're making great points of like, yeah, it's the same concern, the same stress. Like everybody wants X amount of eggs, and that makes sense.
Is there like a number that like OVA like thinks that people should have, or kind of recommend for people to have? I know that's probably tricky, because like I know
and I'm so glad we're talking about this, because actually it's going to be a point of conversation on our social for this month. And I know that we are going to be planning to go live on National Infertility Awareness Week. So that'll be just perfect in terms of the timing. But sometimes you have to go through more than one cycle. And you want to do that when your fertility is at its prime, because the older that a woman gets, her fertility is decreasing in quality and quantity. So let's say you have a 25-year-old comes in, she wants to freeze her eggs. At OVA, we say, you know what, we'd love for you to freeze around 15 eggs to have about an 80% probability of success if you need to come back and use these eggs. When I say success, I mean a live birth, not just a pregnancy, but a live birth. And that woman could come in at 25 and probably knock it out on one treatment cycle because her ovaries are working efficiently and she has a high reserve. As a woman approaches 30 and into 35, that goal number of eggs to freeze is going to increase. So someone that is 30, we may say 15 to 20. But at 35, we would say, 25, just to have the same chances of success. But the funny part about it is our body is made backwards because as we get older, we're not making as many.
Longer.
So it's a catch-22. So then we have to go through more cycles. But what I tell women is, and what I counsel them on, that is normal. It is normal that your body is doing, it can be irritating, but your body is doing what it's supposed to do. So be prepared before going into this. It may take you a few rounds to get to that goal number. And just because you may not get to 20 or 25 or whatever it may be, doesn't mean that it's not worth it or that it's not going to work. But it's important that we're not over-promising or promising something that we can't deliver. And egg freezing is all the statistics, the stats and the success all come down to the age in which you froze your eggs and the number that you froze.
Right. No, I think that's so great to have a baseline and have those expectations because egg freezing is, you can't go back, right? So like if someone's like, oh, you can do 5, and then 5 years later, they're like, okay, but now I need to go get 15. Well, it's not going to be the same. So
It's
that's
not going to be the same.
to your point.
And with that too,
trials
is the cost. Right.
Okay, that was my next question. I'm honestly, Amanda and I are also going off questions that the listeners asked, but that was my next question. So I guess average cost of egg freezing, number one. And then the second question I have, does OVA accept insurance? And if so, what do you know about insurance, if anything, that they can kind of help with the cost?
I know little to nothing about insurance. So I will say that insurance is something that I choose not to tackle. It is so complicated. But to kind of give some ballpark, and I can only speak for our facility, it's different throughout, the United States, depending on where you're going. But egg freezing, I would say is going to range, for the cycle, probably somewhere between like $6,000 to $10,000. And then you have to think about the medications, which can sometimes be just as expensive as the cycle itself. Those are going to range sometimes between $3,500 to $7,500. The more fertile you are, the less meds you need to stimulate the ovary. So think of those medications as like fuel, right? So if your ovary is already working, efficiently, it's not going to need as much fuel to really get it going. But if the opposite happens, if your ovary is, having some age-related changes or slowed down a bit, you're going to need more of that fuel. You're going to need more meds to stimulate it. The good news is that, when compared to 10 years ago, insurance is becoming, it's more on board with this. A lot of times insurance will say, not unless there is like a medically necessary reason for freezing eggs. That would be, for example, someone that may be going through cancer treatment, before they start any sort of medications, would want to go through and preserve their fertility. But from the medication standpoint, a lot of times there is coverage. We do take insurance at OVA, which is really exciting. So if you do have insurance and you know that you may have some coverage, definitely reach out. But I think that OVA also stands alone with, we offer payment plans, which is really nice. Oh, the other thing is there, yeah, it is very rare.
I know like at my clinic, it was like upfront payment of that big
chunk, and then they would like, yeah, and it's literally like, oh, actually, it's like 20 grand more, and you're gonna have to pay right now because you have to go to the next day. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Or like I would get so frustrated, it would be like, let's just say 20,000, and then like I didn't have all the ultrasounds, and so then they were like reimbursing us. So sorry, we just both jumped in, but that is
it is amazing to have that. I think that it makes it. I mean, we really want to make egg freezing. It's expensive. There's no way around that. Right. But to make it as affordable as possible for women. And I think also employers are a lot of times having reimbursement, whether it's through Progeny or Carrot or Maven or all of these amazing companies that are offering that reimbursement. So ask your employer if you do have that benefit. And if you don't, again, being a woman, we sometimes have to advocate for ourselves and have those difficult conversations, but maybe go to HR and say, can you think about adding this on? We've had a lot of women do that and have success with it.
We interviewed the senior VP of progeny last season, and it was the whole episode was just about that. So if you're interested in doing that stuff, go back to our progeny episode.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of women do it and they're successful
Yes,
at
they
getting
are.
progeny added on because it's like an added benefit to insurance. So you said something, again, I'm going off the listener's question. So you mentioned something about the cost of medications, maybe higher depending on like how your ovaries are functioning. So I guess one of the questions was, are all cycles medicated and do they differ based off any diagnosis? So my question is, are these patients getting somewhat of like an initial exam or like baseline testing at the beginning just to understand how their egg freezing medication may differ from the next person?
Always. Yes. Always, always, always. And we streamline things a bit different. So we have patients when they come in, that's the first thing they do. So they'll do an intake call, before they come in, but then they will do their initial testing at OVA. We call it our OvaView testing, but it's essentially ovarian reserve testing, which I love to talk about because I think there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding ovarian reserve and what the testing's telling us and not telling us. And I think that there's a lot of debate on who should be getting the testing. The testing itself is wonderful about telling us about egg quantity. And it's not like, and I'm sure you guys know, it's not like when you got an AMH level drawn or you did your ovarian reserve testing that they said, Amanda, Kat, you've got 152,000 eggs left. Like, it's not like that. So I don't want people to think they're going to come in and have that, very specific number, but there's an ideal range that we're looking for. So, and it's a comprehensive sort of view. It's not just the AMH, but it's a full panel of blood work as well as the ultrasound to look at your ovaries. So when that results come back, yes, it tells us about reserve. Main thing it's telling us is how you're likely going to respond to treatment so that medication protocol can be prescribed for you specifically. Not every 27-year-old, not every 30-year-old, 33-year-old is just going to be treated the same. Everybody's at a different place in their fertility journey. What the testing is not telling us is egg quality. And also, I think the most common misconception is it's not telling us about the likelihood of you to get pregnant naturally in the future. I think that many women come in, they get this testing, it looks beautiful, and they think, I'm good. I'm not gonna have any issues getting pregnant, or I don't need to freeze my eggs because this looks good. And alternatively, when the results don't look good, women automatically go to that worst case scenario of, I'm never gonna have a baby. And this testing is not telling us. It has no insight on that. It really does not. As women, if you're ovulating and having regular periods, you're ovulating out one egg per month. So it doesn't matter how many eggs you have left in that bake, right? You're still just releasing one egg a month.
I'm so glad you said that. And I was victim to this. So not to negatively talk because I think the company is phenomenal, but Modern Fertility, right?
Oh
So
gosh.
let's call it, and we'll limit that, but let's call it, I don't know, 8 years ago, right? I get their kit in the mail, I take it, my AMH is normal. And I'm like, hey, cool, great. I'm super healthy. Like, I'm fine. That wasn't the case for me, right? Like, I have reoccurrent miscarriage, but in somebody in my shoes that's getting that test today and they're like, oh, my AMH is 2, I'm 28 years old, like, I'm good. I'm just so thankful that you mentioned that because I think there's like a lot of like misconceptions out there, or maybe just not enough education on the test.
You're right.
And AMH is one of those things that I would just say over the last 3 years, people are getting more and more educated on because that's like, I know, Amanda, you have diminished ovarian reserve based off your AMH, right? And other things.
No, yeah, but that was at 25. Yeah. And so now I don't even know what it is. I'm sure it's fine.
But I think that's wonderful because some companies out there are giving you a number and they're saying, you're great, you're going to have no issues.
And you get this printout and you're like, but there's no one, like you said, educating you. The next best thing you have aside from that handout is going and Googling. And God knows what you're going to find on that. So I think it is kind of like one of those things with, again, nothing like those companies. I think that the test result, it's not like that it's inaccurate, but it needs to come with the caveat of you should still follow up with the medical professional. This is one piece of the puzzle. There are many other things that could impact this, kind of take this as a grain of salt. And then you think, well, then why am I paying for it?
I know, and it's expensive. I mean, anyways.
I know.
Because if you get those results, then I mean, like you said, you were like, well, I'm fine. So then at that time, that person would be like, I wouldn't need to freeze my eggs. I'm good.
Right.
And so then it just stops there, but it could it could change, or you're like you said, you're not getting the full picture.
Well, then my friends started doing it. Now let's fast forward 5 years later, and I've had like 5 miscarriages, and my friends are doing the modern fertility, and they're like, here's my, and they think I'm like this fertility guru. They're like, here's my number. And I'm like, well, it's good, but do I want to tell them that was mine?
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, it all comes with like personal experience, and I'm sure they're a great company and they're doing
But I think it's
more and more.
important that, again, people talk about this because somebody could be listening to this that may be thinking, like, oh, I was just getting ready to do a test similar to that. And they may now go a different path or go to a doctor's office to try to get the full panel. And I think that that's important because if nobody's talking about it, how is anyone else supposed to know?
Love it.
So true.
Love it. I have so many more questions from our listeners.
Yeah.
Can I go through
Let's do
them?
it. Yeah.
Who is not a good candidate for egg freezing, if anyone?
I think there are some people that are not candidates. And I think the most important thing is first to make the phone call, to not just assume you're not a candidate. I think a lot of times people are like, well, people say that ideal time to freeze your eggs is between 25 and 35. So I'm 36, I'm not a candidate. It's not like that, right? Your ovaries don't know when you turn 35. It's not like they get a phone call and are like, okay, we're gonna just start slowing down now. We're getting to retirement. But I think it's important to make the phone call. Now, granted, if you're 50, you're probably not going to be a great candidate to freeze your eggs. But, if you're in your late 30s or even your early 40s, I think that it would be a good idea just to check in and again, manage the expectations because your path isn't going to look like everyone else's path. It may be a little bit different. I would say some people that have pre-existing medical conditions, obviously egg freezing is an elective procedure where you're having to administer hormones. So if injectable hormones or going under anesthesia or something could exacerbate a pre-existing medical condition, you may not be a candidate. But again, I think that there's a lot of times ways we can work around things. So if you're unsure, you can always talk to your treating physician for whatever your chronic medical condition is, and also talk with a reproductive endocrinologist.
I love it. So at OVA, is there a way that they can schedule an intro call, or that is just
Yes.
like, so can they find that like on your website?
Yeah, so you can DM us on social at OVA Egg Freezing on Instagram. You can give us a jingle at our phone number. So do you want me to give it now, or we can just put it in like the.
We can put it in the show notes. Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, or I can give it now, whatever. If you have
Or
it
you can email
memorized.
us at info@ovaeggfreezing.com. So any of those ways you can reach out and we'll get back to you right away, schedule an intake call, get you scheduled with the nurse and kind of talk through your options and the best path for you.
That's amazing. You guys have, I know sometimes with like clinics and IVF clinics, I've experienced this of just like a long waiting like time. Do you guys have like a long wait list or anything like that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we don't, and it's not for the like the fact that we just don't have the volume. It's just that we get it in, we make it happen. If that means that we're going to be working longer hours, whether that's for intake calls or reviewing results or even for stimulation. I know that some people do have a cap in terms of how many women they can have each month kind of going through. We don't we want to, because again, time is of the essence when it comes to fertility.
So schedule your consult, everyone.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to say, I think it's so important to note, go to the Instagram. So will you drop the handle again is it OVA
Egg Freezing?
Egg Freezing. The office is stunning. And is it on Michigan Avenue?
It is.
Like what? How did
it's in the heart of the Mag Mile. I know.
It's stunning. I mean, you should go to their Instagram. It would be a place when one of the 4 girls yesterday reached out and I was like, you went there? You went there in person? Was it really cool?
Tell me everything. Give me the details.
It is. Yeah. Colleen did an amazing job having that place. And just designed. And it was done that way on purpose, right? It was done to be, a place where you felt comfortable. It's already an anxiety provoking thing. And to make that first step, to make that first phone call is hard. So we want people to feel like when they walk in there, it's not super sterile. It's like your girlfriend's apartment, how I like to say it. That's how I think of it. I wish it looked like my house.
It's
Love
so
that.
pretty. I love that. Well, that's when you said like, yeah, you can just DM us. I'm like, that is just another way of opening access to something like this. Somebody that's just has too much anxiety to pick up the phone and call like this
Yes.
random clinic. Like that is, I think in this day and age, another reason why these types of methods of egg preservation is just so much more accessible to people because there's different outlets of getting information. And I love that.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, and also too for like patients that are going through their treatment cycle. So they have our direct contact information, like our cell phone numbers. So, it makes it more personal, and I think it makes it a better patient experience. And it also, from a nursing standpoint, I like to work that way as well, versus having to go through this laundry list of getting onto a portal and, just takes away, it makes it a lot less personal to do it that way, in my opinion.
100%.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I would love to be able to just like text or even DM my doctor,
Yeah.
I mean, that's so helpful. And I think that will really bring people to you guys because it's that personal level that just make them feel more seen.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think it is telling because we have patients that, tell their friends about it or they're coming back for more than one cycle. But I think the most telling thing of all is that women are coming back to us to use their eggs. They don't have to, it's not required, but they're choosing to. They want to, continue their care with us through one of the most important, most, impactful processes that they'll go through, which is, thawing, fertilizing, and transferring an embryo.
Absolutely. We haven't even talked on Amanda you're in Michigan, right?
I'm currently
so excited for you.
Yep, I'm in an Airbnb right now. So
it's beautiful.
Prepping for transfer.
Yeah, and you probably understand that, right? Like you want to go to the clinic where everything is, and
100%. And that's the other thing. The lab is so important. So I think it's important for the women to go back to the lab or the experts that they're working with versus moving your eggs or embryos because there's always a risk, especially with eggs, that they could become damaged.
Can you touch on that? Because it was the very last question that I have on my thing was, is it better to freeze? And it's not really an option for a lot of women doing egg preservation, right? Because they're normally preserving them because they haven't found their life partner or they're just not ready to have kids yet. But one of the questions was, is it better to freeze eggs or freeze embryos? And so if you're in a situation where you could freeze embryos, do you have any insight on that?
I have a lot of insight on that.
Great.
I have a lot of opinions, but that doesn't mean that much. I have opinions on a lot of things. But in this instance, I would say, 15 years ago, it was advised for a lot of for women that wanted to preserve fertility, if they didn't even have their life partner, to get a donor sperm and to create an embryo, because embryos, no matter which way you look at it, are always going to be more stable than eggs. The best way I know how to explain it is if you think of as an embryo as steadily walking on 2 feet, right? You have the chromosomes from the egg, the chromosomes from the sperm. It's steady, it's balanced. An egg is limping on one. So it's could be messed with, can be like fallen over, could be easily damaged, all of that because it's not as stable. So it did, when egg freezing was starting to come about and, we were learning more about it, it was at that time, many, many years ago, advised for the best success to freeze an embryo. As time has gone on, though, and the experts in this field, the embryologists, because it's not the doctor freezing eggs, right? It's an embryologist. So, and the embryologists have gained this momentum and this, this expertise. It's a very fine-tuned technology. Vitrification, which is the fast freezing way that we freeze embryos and eggs, is very difficult to do with eggs because they are mostly water-based and they're so, so fragile. So it's much easier to freeze an embryo than it is an egg. So I would say that in our laboratory, because we've been doing it for so long, the success rates are so minimal between the two. I mean, again, embryos, there's no way that an egg's ever going to match an embryo, but it's so minimal that for me, if I was a single woman, that small percentage is 100% worth it for me to have control over who I want the sperm source to be in the future.
Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe in the future it is a donor sperm, but I don't know that yet, right?
Right.
So I would definitely take those few percentage points to have that control. So I would advise women, and even women that are, you know, married, that are coming through. Sometimes I even say, I would
Just
still freeze
some
your eggs.
eggs. Yeah, just get
Those are yours. You're the one that's doing all of this hard work. And it's not to say that your partner is not going to be the father of that child, but for right now, these are yours. These are your sole possession. And if once they're fertilized, they cannot be unfertilized.
right.
And they will always be 50-50 ownership of whoever, you know, created them. So nothing could happen to those unless both the sperm and the egg source are on board and signing. So there's a lot of legal stuff that kind of goes into it as well.
I'm so glad we talked about this, because you basically, like, you've just kind of put both of the answers you've given together about like how many eggs do you need. So you're like 15, 20, 25. When people may hear that, it's like embryos, you know, you need 2 to 5, right? To have like a good chance at a live birth. That's just, you know, average.
Yeah.
But when you talk about eggs, like that's why that number is so much higher. Is
Yes.
because
Yes.
even me, like I got 9 eggs. Okay. Oh, whatever. For my first IVF, I got 1 embryo. So I had 9 eggs to 1 embryo. And so it just, I think you just kind of put it all together. Like, yes, there's still, you're going to need a little bit more eggs, like in terms of your cycles.
Yes.
Because there is that just natural attrition rate once you do go on unfreezing them and creating embryos.
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah. And that attrition rate becomes higher the older that you become. So like you said, like freezing 15 eggs, that's not 15 embryos. That's not 15 chances at a baby, right? You learn very quickly how fast those eggs dwindle when you come back to use them.
Yeah. Or even when you, I know, even.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Kat.
No, I don't have anything else. Go ahead.
I was just so happy you talked about like the difference between like how little it is between the embryo and the egg, because I think that was like a misconception that I even had. And I've heard people talk about it, like just friends who have talked about, you know, maybe doing egg preservation and all that. They're like, well, I think I'm just going to wait until I find the guy because it's better to thaw out the embryo versus thawing the egg. Like I have a better chance. And so like the fact that you said that, I think is huge, and people all over are going to know that it truly is like such
it is. Now for us, those percentage rates difference is for our laboratory, but you know, so every single lab's gonna have different percentage rates between their eggs and their embryos. So I don't, you know, it could be a much larger difference depending on where you're going, but I think that's an important thing to bring up because it's a question to ask and to advocate for yourself.
And that's why you go to OVA.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Okay, Whitney, we've been like throwing you just so many like one-off questions. It was just everybody was very interested. What do you want listeners to know about egg preservation or about OVA or about you?
Oh my gosh. I think that the one thing that I would say as a piece of advice, kind of to tie this all together, is you get one life. And you don't want to live that life with regrets. And you know what? Maybe you go and you learn about egg freezing, and like I mentioned, you realize that it's not right for you. And that's okay. But at least you gathered that information. At least you can say, I educated myself and I made that decision for myself. And maybe you go and you freeze your eggs, and hopefully you never have to use them. But I think that when life starts to take its turns, and it will, and things are going to be thrown at you that you don't expect. The one thing that I know that a woman would never regret is having her eggs on ice.
But you couldn't have ended that better. That's true. Yeah, I kind of want to freeze my eggs now.
I do have one question though. Obviously, I'm someone who does travel to go to a clinic.
Yes.
What does that look like for you guys? Do you have people who come in that are traveling? Like, how does monitoring work with that?
Yeah.
Out of state?
So we have a lot of patients that come from out of state. We've even had people that have come like out of the country. So it is doable. I think that it can be daunting sometimes when you start learning about not only you've got this treatment cycle and stimulation and monitoring, but now you got to figure out how, you know, to get to the location. Like sometimes that can be so stressful that you may just be like, I'm throwing in the towel and I'm not doing it. We really work with our patients though, in terms of making it as easy as possible for them. So you have a couple of options. And if you do have the flexibility, I think that it's a great idea to look into coming to the Chicagoland area for the full stimulation period, which is about 10 to 14 days. It is not mandatory for that full 10 to 14 days, but I think it's a great place to come, especially in the summer. You can like do some shopping and stuff while you're here, and it's a fun place to be. So if you're able to with your job and of course the finances and stuff involved, that's what I would recommend. If you're not, we can definitely help you with starting your monitoring wherever you're located. And we would assist you with finding a facility to like get your ultrasound and get your blood work done and having it, sent over and everything same day. But you have to be in the Chicagoland area around, I would say, medication day 7, because we need to be prepared for when you're ready for your retrieval. We don't want you having to take your trigger shot and then trying to figure out how the heck you're going to get to Chicago, right? So you would have to be in Chicago around that, stim day 7. And then in terms of going home, we want you to be local to Chicago for about 2 days following the retrieval, just to make sure you're feeling okay. And then it's fine to fly or drive after that. Great question.
No, thank you. That's so helpful. And the fact that you guys actually help find
a
monitor, because that's been my issue, is my clinic here does not help me get any monitoring in North Carolina. And so I've had to figure out all on my like own, and the clinics, it's really hard to find someone who So the fact that you actually help like facilitate that's incredible. That's really, really helpful.
And some places are harder than others. I'm not going to lie. We have some people that live in some very remote places, which can be a challenge, but we're up for it. We're up for the challenge.
That's amazing.
I know. Thank you so much, Whitney, for being with us. I want to make sure that we've tagged all of the handles of everything. Obviously, people probably know how to find you, but it's Whitney_B_Angel.
You got it, girl. Yes.
That was on luck. And then at Ova Freezing, Egg Freezing.
At Ova Egg Freezing.
I've done that twice. At Ova Egg Freezing. And both of those we'll put in the show note of the episode. And then you can find it on Instagram. We'll have them tagged. Anything else? Your website, Ova Egg
Our
Freezing?
website is www.ovaeggfreezing.com.
Awesome.
And there's like a little link on there to where if you want to like put in an inquiry, you can just send it, goes right through, and we will give you a ring.
Well, thank you so much for being
here. These were awesome. These were amazing questions. Your listeners are so smart. Number one, to be following along with you guys, because I love what you're doing and I really admire, sharing your story and, using your platform to reach and educate women. It means so much. It really does. And I mean, the questions that they asked are awesome. So you guys are doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, you too.
So much. I know, right? Everything you're doing with Ova and just everything you share is incredible. So thank you so much. And we can't wait for people to reach out to you guys and hear all.
Yes. And I saw the merch that you guys just like released. How cute is that? And those photos.
You're so sweet.
Thank you.